Joining us for a conversation is the founder of Capitalism and Morality, and our guest is also a highly sought-out advisor to institutional investors, the always fascinating JAYANT BHANDARI. Mr. BHANDARI, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Maurice.
Oh, it's great to have you back on the show, as we will cover a lot of ground today, from macroeconomics to geopolitics and investment opportunities for our audience members. Let's begin with the former, shall we? JAYANT, while most Americans are distracted by the NBA playoffs and the quarterback trades in the NFL, a significant development may have just occurred that may impact the entire world. The International Monetary Fund has just unveiled a new digital currency known as the Universal Monetary Unit. For someone not aware of this new currency, why was it created and what type of impact could this have on global currencies?
Maurice, I didn't know about this currency until you mentioned that to me. But the fact is that a lot of countries are trying to bring in digital currency to enable the government to control day-to-day economic lives of their citizens. My view is that we are heading towards a totalitarian future. Globalization has broken down, and we really have put in place utter fools as in positions of governance in our society. And fools have a tendency to collectivize, to run a tyrannical totalitarian system, because fools think that they are the smartest people in the town. They think they should run lives of their citizens, completely forgetful of the fact that citizens were smart enough to vote for them, so they should have been smarter than the rulers themselves. But that's not the math that works in the minds of the rulers. So now, as you see, we have really stupid people running the world. The problem is that before they can bring together all these totalitarian systems in place, this system is going to fall apart. So I'm not so worried about these digital coins, because they will never be able to, they will for sure not be able to make these things work over the next few years. The world is heading towards a chaotic future right now.
Now, these technocrats and world leaders and big thinkers that you just referenced, didn't they get us to this exact position that we're in right now?
Well, I mean, Maurice, and we have talked about this in the past, democracy has inverted the pyramid of meritocracy. The bottom 51% people, or to be mathematically more precise, bottom 50% plus 1% chooses who comes to rule us today. So democracy is anti-meritocratic, and it has resulted into this bread and circuses set of people who have come to rule us. As you rightly mentioned, most people are into MBAs and sports, and I don't really follow any of those things, Maurice, and I have nothing against people who follow those. But the problem is, for a vast majority, not just the majority, a vast majority of people, bread and circuses is more important than institutions, philosophy, systems. And they are into bread and circuses, and they want free stuff. They want to be entertained. And this is what Kamala Harris and Biden and Trudeau are doing today. And the end result is what we are facing, and what we will continue to face, because these people are hollowing out our institutions. I was this morning watching a video of a cockroach, a dead cockroach, which was still walking around because the brain of the cockroach had been taken over by a virus. So the cockroach had been completely hollowed out, but the cockroach was still walking around because the virus was sending signals to the legs to move. And I think this is the kind of institutions we are getting to right now. Maurice, the only credit I give myself is that I grew up in a system which is a non-system, which is a completely feral, barbaric society of India. And I can see where the first world is moving towards. Now, the first world is not going to get to India, because India is just truly a dysfunctional place. But the first world is certainly destroying itself by this wokeism, by trying to control economic lives of people, by ramping up the welfare state, and by creating the moral hazard by increasing the size of population that is dependent on the nanny government. Which means that these people, increasingly the vast majority of people, want governments to increase in size because it seemingly at that moment works in their interest to vote for a bigger government.
You reference India and you reference woke, or should I say joke, or should I say broke? I don't know. You pick you pick which nomenclature you want. We'll get to that in just a minute here. I want to stick with currencies here. This leads me to ask, with all these currencies that are being developed, there must be a reason why. So the question I have, sir, is the United States past its peak as the world's reserve currency, or is it here to stay for the long term?
Well, absolutely, Maurice. The United States has passed its peak as the world's reserve currency. That you can clearly see that in how many countries are reducing US dollar as a part of the foreign reserves that they hold. China has been reducing it. Many other countries have been reducing the proportion of their foreign reserves in US dollar. But that said, you should remember the US is still by far the best country on the planet. It still has among the best institutions in the world. It has perhaps the most enlightened population on the planet even today, despite massive degradation that has taken place. So US has such a huge quality and such a huge inertia that the US dollar will continue to be the international reserve currency for the foreseeable future. But at the same time, we should also remember that the US government has increasingly destroyed the moral authority that the US used to have abroad, and its independence as an arbitrator of what was fair and just. And as a result, what we increasingly see is that people are pulling back, countries are pulling back from trusting the US anymore. Now, that does not mean they don't depend on the US right now, because let's see that India wants to buy $2 billion worth of armaments from Russia. Now, these two countries are supposed to be among the best friends. Unfortunately, they can't do the transaction because they can't trust each other, and they must need the US as the mediator, US currency as the mediator to do the transaction. So, that's how important the US dollar is. But the fact remains that people are now increasingly holding less and less of the US dollar, which means that more and more US dollars are going to return back to the US. The cash which was issued to people for no interest being paid by the US government, that money is going to return back. And bonds, the treasuries that the US government released will come under pressure. So this cash is going to return back to the US, and it will be a huge amount of problem for the Federal Reserve for many, many years to suck out this excess cash from the system. Otherwise, we will have inflation. So inflation will be a part of the US system going forward, and that is what the market is increasingly recognizing. The US dollar has clearly gone past its peak, and it will be the reserve currency, but it will no longer enjoy the extra value of a reserve currency, because now the flow of the US dollar is returning back to the US.
It certainly is a duplicitous scenario that you just alluded to, with all that currency coming back to the United States, and the impact will be, we're already feeling some effects of it, but I can only imagine as those currencies repatriate themselves here, the impact it's going to have on our wallets. You also referenced that governments or central banks have been net sellers of the U.S. currency, but they've also been net buyers of gold. So germane to the subject of currencies, what are your thoughts on precious metals right now, and is this a good time to buy?
Well, so Maurice, I have been ambivalent about gold in the past when I have talked with you. I increasingly think that despite the fact that gold price has gone up quite a bit over the last few weeks, there is now a significant upside in gold. And the reason is that we have a very chaotic present already. We have a war in Sudan. Pakistan is collapsing. There are massive problems in sub-Saharan Africa. There are increasing problems in the Western world. So the world is a very chaotic place. The governments are trying to keep control of every penny that you hold in your pocket. And of course, that penny they want to convert into digital currency so that this bureaucrat who does not live in the real world can tell you what you can spend that money on. This is going to lead to a very insecure and chaotic future. And as a result, we will have a degradation of the US dollar. We will have problems. And because of this chaos, because of lack of trust in the system, people will want to hold something physical in their pocket that they can access in the time of need, because your bank account might get frozen. And I tell you, a close friend of mine had her brokerage account in the US completely frozen. She was thrown out of even logging into her account. And FIRNA, which is the financial authority, did nothing about it. So, once you have everything electronic, you can be frozen out of the system because of because of the moodiness of these bureaucrats, which, in Canada, they did the same thing. They froze bank accounts of people during COVID days. So you really want to have something physical in your pocket, which you can access in the time of need. And that is not just about time of desperate need, because you might just want to have some cash, and cash you can't keep because cash is getting inflated away at 5 or 6% rate every year. What you need is something that has tangible value and which maintains its value going forward. And for me, gold is a very, very, very important part of that protection.
You referenced banks and capital controls, in essence, what you alluded to here. I can share this recently happened with a customer that attempted to make his first precious metal purchase. And of course, I'm going to leave his name out of this, but he attempted to just wire $22,000, if I'm not mistaken, from his brokerage account to his bank. When the funds arrived at his bank, they released only 25% of that $22,000 the next day, and then he had to wait 10 business days, if I'm not mistaken, for them to release the remainder, 75% of that. So that should just, show you or indicate to you that something isn't right, because these are two accounts that were actually linked. He had his bank account linked to the brokerage account, so it wasn't a new transaction because the funds originally came from that bank account. And I can also share with you, 3 years ago, I was just attempting to make a six-figure transaction, and I didn't even want they're called money orders, but I don't like to call them money orders. It was a currency order. I didn't even want cash. I just wanted it was a six-figure transaction, and I was in line at a bank where I do numerous transactions, wires, international wires, and I was there for about 45 minutes, and I just wanted a cashier's check / money order. So something is wrong with the system, but that was 2.5 years ago, my transaction, 6 figures. Now it's come down to 5 figures, and I can only imagine what's going to happen once it reaches the average citizen that just needs to make a withdrawal out of their ATM machine, and they're going to have that limit of, I don't know, let's pick a number for the month, $1,000, and they need to feed their families, and they need to pay the utilities, bills, whatever you name it. They're not going to be able to do it. So you've made a great point.
And Maurice, remember the US dollar, US as a nation is what the world looks up to. If the US degrades, people think that what the US is doing must be the right thing to do. So it makes it possible for the tyrants around the world to tell their citizens that, hey, even the US is doing it, so we can do it as well. Mm-hmm. So US is supposed to be the yardstick of moral values and what is right and the rule of law. And if the US reduces its rule of law, then it will inflict damage around the world. Now, Maurice, I'm currently in Tokyo. A lot people, cash is the king here. People use a lot of cash in this country. And that is a great thing because, firstly, these people have imported a lot of good values from the Western society, and they have retained and maintained and adapted those values for their own purposes. And because the way they have functioned, they have preserved the Western values within their countries in East Asia.
Now, I have to ask you this as well, because a number of our audience members are buyers of precious metals. We talked about gold. What are your thoughts on silver, platinum, palladium? Any thoughts on those, sir?
Well, you see, Maurice, platinum and palladium are, I don't really, I have spent a lot of time trying to understand those two commodities. The problem is that platinum and palladium are underpinned by a lot of issues, social and political issues to do with Russia and South Africa. And sometimes you might be producing these commodities at a massive loss, but you will continue to produce them for political purposes in those countries. And as Keynes said, you can the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So I'm not going to bet a fight with the political and social inertia of South Africa and Russia. Or at least should I say, I don't understand those things perfectly, and I don't understand because of those things what the future of these two commodities would be. But clearly, silver and gold are the commodities that have a huge amount of value in trying to preserve your buying power. And not only your buying power, but to preserve what you own from the expropriatory intentions of the bureaucrats and politicians that you have in your country.
Leaving the United States, let's go south to Latin America. What are the latest developments there that we should be concerned about?
So, Maurice, I mentioned to you that, US, there was something called Pax Americana, which came into existence after Pax Britannia went away. America was arbitrating peace around the world. America had the moral authority. Now, it did a lot of wrong things, but it did enough good that overall, the influence, the political influence that the US had on countries was, in my view, net positive. For example, in Latin America, whenever those governments drifted towards left, American government walked in and said, hey, either we are going to replace your politicians or by force, by insurgency or whatever, good or bad, wrong ways. But America tried to stop drift of Latin American countries towards the left. Now, here is the problem, Maurice, today, that America itself has gone woke. America has become leftist. Its politicians like, Kamala Harris, Biden, are extremely woke people. And these woke people, apart from the fact that they don't have moral authority anymore to exercise influence on other countries, they actually believe in leftism and wokeism. And the end result is what you see. You see Chile just yesterday or the day before yesterday announced that it was going to partially or fully nationalize the lithium mining in that country. I was in Chile for a month later last year. And Chile is almost like a burnt down country. People have gone extremely woke. They have gone increasingly hedonistic. And I must say that the end game will be barbarism and savagery. And because America is no longer able to exercise its influence, Latin American countries, all the way from Mexico to Argentina and Chile, will continue to drift leftist and towards becoming increasingly woke. You have problems in Colombia, you have huge problems in Ecuador today. Mexico is becoming very difficult for foreigners. So across the board in Latin America, you will see political problems because the US is no longer able to exercise its influence and actually does not even know what influence to exercise because US government has itself gone completely woke.
Yeah, I also read recently in Argentina, they're having a homeless crisis at the airport, of all places, in the capital city there. I don't know if you had an opportunity to read that.
Well, so again, Maurice, I was in Argentina recently. I was not in the capital, so I don't know about this homeless crisis in the capital. But the inflation rate is horrendous in Argentina. And this is where foreigners make a huge amount of mistake, and we talked about this in the past. My money gets extraordinarily good value in Argentina because I pay, because of the black market rate, which is called blue rate in Argentina, I get twice as much of the local currency by exchanging my US dollar for the local currency, which means that I pay a fraction of what the locals pay for the same services and my dinners or anything that I used. So for a foreigner might go to Argentina and say, hey, what a heaven it is, what a wonderful country it is. But for the locals, which is the perception we should try to understand, because Argentina is for Argentinians, the fact remains that they continue to have massive inflation. And in the last 6 months, I was there later last year. So in just the last 4 or 5 months, the currency rate of Argentina has fallen by about 50 to 70%. So it's very hard for you to hold Argentinian cash in your pocket because it loses its value on a daily basis.
Leaving Latin America, let's go east and visit India, which has just become the most populated country on the planet. Sir, I know you're not a fan of India for several reasons, but is this a game changer now that India is the most populated country? And are we going to see the world's attention begin to shift to India now that it has surpassed China in population?
As I have told you many times, Maurice, the world should be paying a lot of attention to what's happening in India. Today, a lot of people, and I don't have the numbers with me, but a significant number of people crossing the border from Mexico to the US illegally as refugees are actually Indians. So there is an increase of refugees from India happening to the US. Now, India is about Indians are 1 out of every 5 people on the planet. So what happens in India, good or bad, has an influence around the world, particularly when there are no border walls and the people can actually move into another borders. I think there will be a massive refugee crisis eventually going to happen because of India. India is really falling apart, Maurice, and I know, and this frustrates me no end because the World Bank and the IMF keep coming out with extremely rosy portrayal of India, which is completely fake, which is completely deluded, which is completely unethical, completely wrong. And the reason is, Maurice, that anyone who speaks my kind of understanding in a boardroom in the IMF or the World Bank would get fired right away. So they have only politically correct people sitting in their boardrooms today. The end result is that the foreigners don't really understand India. And if a white Western person goes to India, returns back, and if he or she has a problem in India, he is constrained from speaking up about it because he does not want to look racist or sexist. So he keeps quiet. The problem, however, is that there is a problem. You can't run away from reality by ignoring the existence of reality. India is falling apart. Its economy has been stagnant for the last 3 or 4 years. And I know there's a lot of talk about how rapidly India is growing this year, but it's just trying to make up for all the massive loss of economic output that it suffered during the COVID days. But moreover, whatever benefit that is growth that is happening is mostly happening to a minority of the population, which is the top 1 or 2 or 3% of the population, the Adani kind of people, the Dilip built-con kind of people. You must have read a lot about Adani recently. This company lost most of a massive amount of its value because there was apparently or allegedly from this American short seller, there was a huge amount of fraud going on in how the company was portraying itself. So, those people might be benefiting, but the larger proportion of India is actually worse off than I would say what they were like 10 or 15 years back. There's a massive amount of poverty, there's a massive amount of hunger, and there's a massive amount of joblessness. And the Indians are extremely unskilled at anything. Maurice, the problem is that, again, as you know, I have spent a lot of time in India recently. You can't even the maids are unable to do their job properly. Now, in East Asia, when I travel, if I have a Filipino worker or an Indonesian person, they actually know how to get things done. They can be trained. Indians are so untrained. And I must say, because of this general ecology of chaos, people cannot be taught systems in that country. So again, India is falling apart. Corruption is rampant, Maurice. I had, for over a period of a few months, I had encounters with the police department of the central province of Madhya Pradesh. And I tell you, the higher you go to complain, the only thing that changes is how much money you have to pay in bribes. The whole system is corrupt. There is no one to protect you. There's no sense of law and order in that country. And my guess is that India is the next Pakistan. India will likely become worse than Pakistan over the next few years.
Now, Jayant, your comments regarding India are juxtaposed to what we hear often on the financial news channels that always state that India is an emerging economy. But you have a different opinion. What do you see India as?
Well, so Maurice, I want to take a historical picture of what India was before the Islamic, ruthless, barbaric Islamic rulers, savage Islamic rulers came into India. And I think despite the fact that these Islamic rulers were barbaric and savage, they were already a massive improvement for what India was like those days. Then Europeans came and Europeans tried to civilize that country. And I think India became a much, much, much better place because of European presence. Europeans brought in the concept of education. There was no concept of, railways, post office, law and order, judiciary in that country, in India. So Europeans, particularly the British, brought in that concept. Christianity brought in the concept of moral values, which already had been brought in by Islamic rulers to a certain extent. I have no love for Islam, Maurice, and I think they get a lot of things wrong, but at least they have the concept of discipline and moral values. They get all those values, most of those values wrong in my view, but at least they have the concept. India did not have those concepts. It was a feral society 1,000 years back, a completely feral society. People did not even have the concept of clothing properly. Now, because of massive improvement brought in by European rulers, the population of India has grown up by about 10 times. So from the date that British arrived in India, population is now about 10 times. So that is the massive contribution that Europeans managed to make to India. And I think what we have done over the last 70 years of so-called independence is that we have hollowed out those institutions because Indian, as a core, as a society, as a culture, does not have the concept of moral values. They don't really understand the significance of having moral people running your country. As a result, we Indians don't really understand when psychopaths rise up in power, as long as those psychopaths are emotionally amenable to this larger population. So the end result is that we have true psychopaths running India today. They are quite brain dead, I would say, quite junkie-like people now running the bureaucracy and politics of India.
Now, before we get all the hate responses that we tend to have when you come on, you referenced two faiths, Christians and Islam, and you're an atheist. If I can speak for you here, so you can't get on Mr. Bhandari regarding that. And also, I've heard many times that you're a puppet for Great Britain, and you're not from Great Britain. So just want to set the record straight for anyone who wants to have a rebuttal with a personal attack. Use an argument that is based on what he has said, use a counter argument, but not a personal attack. I see him all the time, so I just want to clear the air on that. A question.
Yeah, Maurice, a big problem that has emerged recently is that comparing India with the West is bad enough in the minds of many Indians, despite the fact that India is one of the poorest, more wretched countries on the planet. That is bad enough comparing the West with India. But Indians go completely crazy when you try to compare India with Pakistan. And Pakistanis go completely crazy if you compare Pakistan with India, because they see their own reflection when they talk about the other country, because they are both equally degraded, degenerate, and immoral societies. And they are both reverting back to their pre-British, pre-European state of society, which will be feral and then savage and barbaric.
We've talked about the population, but something I've never considered here, and I don't know if you may have this answer here, but with this population growth, are these children going into married homes? Because you referenced morals as well. Are these single-parent homes? I'm sorry.
Maurice, this is very interesting. You go back 1,000 years, and India was a feral country. The concept of family, the concept of community, was brought in by Islamic rulers, and brought in a big way by the British rulers and Christianity. They brought in the culture of moral values in this society. So so when Indians say that family culture is inherent to India, they are lying to you. The family culture was brought into India by Europeans. They did not have the concept of families. Now, Maurice, I did not believe in the concept of families until I arrived in the UK when I went to study in the UK, because I had never seen a happy family in that country. Wives and men, I did not really, in my emotions, understood the concept of love, because I had never seen it. I'm not just talking about my family. I think my family was among the much better ones compared to the rest of the country. There's no concept of love in that country. So while the hollowed out institution of marriage is still very much there, it is still hollowed out. The people stick with each other because they have no other choice, because the society made single mothers unacceptable. So because of that rigid rules imposed by Europeans, the families are still in a way intact. But things are changing very, very rapidly. Maurice, remember, the society, the Indian society, has no underpinnings of moral values, which means that if you remove the rules, which means that until now, until recently, no one got divorced, no one became a single mom, because moral values don't exist, and because you no longer impose rules as strictly. Over the next few years, single motherhood will increase exponentially in India. Promiscuity is already massive in that country. Divorce rate is already, from what I have heard among the middle class, the so-called educated middle class, the divorce rates are increasing very, very rapidly. And remember, the lower class was always feral in that country because the British never managed to influence the cultural values of the rural and lower class people. So the problem is that while single, 40 to 50% of children are born out of wedlock in the US, and it is accepted. In India, this will go much worse. And the reason is that not only the institution is getting destroyed, but the lack of moral underpinnings in that society means that society, when the tyrannical application of rules go away completely over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, India will actually culturally and socially fall apart. There will be a massive rise in single motherhood. There are already women, a lot of girls who walk around almost half naked because they want to prove to the world that they have arrived. So, all this hedonistic, barbaric behavior will arrive in India very, very rapidly because there's no underpinning of moral values in that country.
You referenced moral underpinnings here. You shared a video with me that I can't show here, but I'll have a link to that video below in the description box. What are we looking at when we're watching this video? Can you kind of narrate for us what the scenario is there?
Okay, so, just about a week back or 2 weeks back, there was an accident in the city of Indore in India. And I went to do my engineering degree from Indore. I lived there for 5 years. Indore is supposed to be one of the cleanest and best cities in India. Now, what happened in this city was that in a temple over a stepwell, a historic stepwell, what they had done was that they had put a thin layer of concrete to cover it up. Everything in India happens based on bribes. So you can pretty much get away with anything. So in Indore, they had covered up with a very thin layer of concrete. And in the tweet message that I sent you, you can see how thin that concrete is. Not understanding the nature of concrete, these people had brought in a lot of people sitting on top of that concrete. That concrete collapsed. A lot of these people fell into the stepwell, and about 50 people died. And the video that I show you is a video of, at the circumference on the ground, there are about 50 or 100 people standing, a lot of police officers, a lot of so-called rescue people. And they are all telling one person who is the only person trying to bring up a woman to the top. The person trying to bring this person does not have any safety gear. He has no helmet. He has no shoes. And the cord that they are using is cord made up from broken pieces. While he's still trying to come up with 50 people trying to tell this rescue person what to do, the knot that was, this made up cord from small pieces of cord gave way. And the woman fell back into the stepwell, which of course meant that she died and crashed by falling. But this is the situation with that country, how completely dysfunctional that country is. Among the best cities in the country, they could not mobilize a rescue operation. The police, which was standing there, they had no understanding of safety measures. Just the chaos is worth watching, but it also tells you about what is wrong with the economy of the country. 100 people trying to do one person's job, and that one person's job does not get done well, leading to the death of that woman, which is how uneconomic the contribution of most of Indians are. And this is what makes me extremely sad about the country. You have to go walk around and live in that society for a few days to really understand that country has no concept of system. It's a dysfunctional society, and there is actually no concept of moral values, which means that you cannot create any system in that country because, at the end of the day, it is values that hold the bricks of any system together. And if you don't have moral values, everything falls apart.
Yeah, I applaud the heroic efforts of that gentleman and what he attempted to do. But you're correct. Where was EMS, if you would, and where was the human chain, and where was the collective effort, if you will, of everyone? Because imagine what he had to do to bring her to the position where she was, and he's only one person. That's a lot of weight. And that certainly is a unpleasant sight. Again, we can't show the video here. We'll leave a link in the description box. And viewer discretion. Make sure you're an adult if you're going to watch it. I wouldn't share it and show it to children. You did reference one more point here with regards to India about the economy. It seems that Apple seems to have an interest, if you will, where they just opened up their first iPhone store or shop in India. Is this a sign for things to come?
Well, yes and no, Maurice, and this is not for the Indian audience. My best guess is that shop has been opened to impress the woke, relatively inexperienced brokers and analysts in Wall Street. It is an attempt by Apple to convey to the Wall Street that there's a huge amount of growth is still to come. India is not a growth market for Apple, Maurice, and anyone worth his salt in that country would want to go to Bangkok or London to buy his iPhone. They are not going to buy in their iPhones in India because they don't have this prestige conversation to have if they buy an iPhone in India. I think, again, that Apple shop is mostly to convey to the Wall Street that, hey, there's still a lot of growth to come from Apple when Apple might be running out of options. There's nothing else. Apple did move some of their manufacturing facility to India. I think maybe 1% or so from China to India, again, to impress the Wall Street more than anything else. But from what I heard, the iPhones made from the Indian facility are coming out with a lot of defects. And this is, again, a problem with India. Indians don't have the concept of values, nothing to keep things together. So they don't really understand the concept of value of quality. So they just put things together, hoping that it would work. So those kind of things have never worked out in that country. India never industrialized for the same reason, and India will never industrialize in the future either. It's a pre-industrial society. It's a pre-civilization society. There's no civilization in that country. The structure was imposed by the British rulers, and that structure has been hollowed out and now taken over by the virus of completely feral, junky kind of people in that country. So again, Maurice, as you know, I have historically advised companies about investing in India, and most of the time I tell them not to invest in that country because it looks very attractive. India looks very attractive. The costs are very low. You probably pay about $4 a day to a worker for a 12-hour work. A lot of things look very cheap in that country, but when it comes down to getting things done, nothing gets done in that country. People are unskilled. The institutions don't work. There's corruption everywhere. For something that I needed to pay about 50 cents to get a job done in India, I was asked for a bribe of $800. So that's the kind of corruption that exists there. I have never seen a public servant who does not ask for a bribe. So again, this whole thing about Apple setting up a shop in India is fallacious. It's a way to fool the Wall Street at best, or perhaps the board of Apple does not really understand India. They are all probably woke people who and they have no courage to speak up their mind. to really try to understand India. So they want to live with this romantic view on the future of India. Maurice, I have been talking with you for the last 5-6 years, and I think you might agree that I haven't been proven wrong about my projections about China and India, and mostly that you should never even compare the two countries, because China is headed towards a possibility of becoming another South Korea, whereas India is headed towards becoming another Sudan in the next few years.
Well, I'll take it a step further. I can't recall one time you've been wrong on any of your projections. So, yeah. Well, leaving India, let's move on to resource stocks. Mr. Bhandari, when it comes to arbitrage opportunities, your name is second to none. Do you have any to share with us?
Let's talk about one company. One company, Step Gold, is acquiring another Canadian listed junior called Anacortes Mining. The ticker of Anacortes is XYZ. And that is the ticker, XYZ. And it is trading at about 39 cents or 40 cents. And at that price, it offers you an arbitrage upside of 25%. The merger value of Anacortes Mining is 50 cents. And I think Step Gold, which is acquiring Anacortes Mining, is fairly valued. So the underpinning value will still be there, and you have a 25% arbitrage upside in owning Anacortes Mining. There's another ASX company called Essential Mining or Essential Lithium. I can't remember the name exactly. The ticker is ESS, and it is trading at 45 cents. It was going to get acquired by another company for 50 cents in cash. The deal did not go through because the shareholders of ESS went against the deal. Which meant that ESS fell back to 45 cents. My guess is that given what's happening in Chile right now, which is to do with nationalization, people will pay attention to lithium stocks where projects are outside Chile, and eventually there should come a better value, better offer for ESS in the future. So I'm happy buying ESS right now. It is not a direct arbitrage for the moment, but I will not go for it above 45 cents. I did acquire it at 45 cents and 44 cents recently.
Well, on behalf of everyone, Mr. Bhandari, thank you for sharing those opportunities with us. Now, before we leave, Giant, all of the aforementioned are connected in one way or another to a subject that is your life's passion, which is philosophy. For someone new to your work, how does philosophy apply to our discussion today?
Maurice, we actually had a fair bit of discussion about values and moral values. And the thing is that without values, there is no glue to hold society together. We are feral, we are barbaric, and eventually savage if there is no glue of moral values holding society together. Europeans were the only people who developed the concept of civilization and moral values. They really were the only people. And they exported their values on a silver platter to the people in the third world and the people in East Asia and the people in Americas. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that apart from East Asian countries, which is Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, other countries outside the Western world completely failed to absorb the values of that Europeans brought to them. And the reason is that there was no underpinning of truth or no underpinning of exploratory mind among the people in the third world. The end result is that India, the third world has become very dysfunctional, and the values did not stick. So that is the problem we have today in the third world.
An extension of values is behavior. And you have probably my favorite quote I've ever heard. When you change your heroes, you change your behavior. Can you just expand on that? I know it sounds simple, but it's actually the solution, because everyone wants to know what the problem is, but we don't ever talk about the solutions. That to me is the solution. Can you expand on that, sir?
Well, again, Maurice, I come back to the same thing. The understanding moral values is extraordinarily important. Without moral values, there's no civilization, and the only way you can absorb moral values is by interacting with people who have moral values, who give you feedback. And if you have in your society people you can look up to, people like Doug Casey, people, there are a lot of great people in the US, in the Western world. But somehow, because of this inversion of meritocracy that has happened, the heroes that we today have are like Kim Kardashian or Paris Hilton, or, the celeb, what we call, the fake celebrities, not the patricians. These are, these are just fake people who have become heroes of our society. So looking up to good people, looking up for good leaders is what brings moral values in us. And that actually also makes us a happy people in the long term. Maybe not in the immediate, because in the immediate, hedonism gives us the most pleasure, but hedonism, and I have lived that life, Maurice, so I'm not saying I've been a saint, but hedonism is a momentary, transitionary happiness or pleasure, and it passes away very, very quickly. And then you must seek a peace over a long period of time, and that is only possible if you have moral values. Europeans developed the concept of moral values. The only society that absorbed those values to some extent are East Asian countries, and rest of the people, 4 billion of the third world, including Latin American countries, failed to absorb them. And that is why those societies are falling away. And that is why I run my seminar, because I want to remind Western people about how important moral values is. And, the name of my seminar is Capitalism and Morality. Capitalism is moral, and it is extremely important to have moral values. Otherwise, we will revert back to we will lose our civilization eventually. And the West is rapidly losing its civilization because it has given up on Christianity. And Christianity was a cornerstone to a fabric that provided moral values to the society.
Now, speaking of capitalism and morality, where will it be conducted this year?
So, Maurice, we have started, I have run Capitalism and Morality in Vancouver for the last 12, 13 years. And now this year, we are also starting a Calgary in Canada chapter of Capitalism and Morality. So the Calgary seminar will be held on the 20th of May, 2023, and the Vancouver seminar will be held on the 9th of September, 2023. So now we will have 2 seminars running in Canada every year.
Oh, I love it. Now, Mr. Bhandari, if I want to attend, how can I register and what is the cost?
Both seminars are similarly priced, around $160. You can go to my website, JAYANTBHANDARI.com, and there's a tab called Capitalism and Morality, within which you will see the program details of the Calgary seminar and the Vancouver seminar, and register for those 2 seminars independently. About $160.
And for someone who's new to it, if you want to see a collection of these previous seminars that Mr. Bhandari's conducted with his awesome, insightful, intriguing guests regarding this subject matter of philosophy, visit his website. We'll have the link there for you. And you can just see, I think from September through December, you released a collection of different discussions, and they were each in their own merit worth a whole conversation in and of themselves.
Well, Maurice, I have to thank you for editing and uploading those videos. You did a fabulous job, and I'm grateful for the work you did. And you have helped me a lot with these videos in the past. So again, thank you very much. All those videos are available on my website. There are links to the YouTube and Odyssey on my website to those videos.
Well, the pleasure was all mine, sir. Last question for you, sir. What did I forget to ask?
Well, I just want to mention some of the names who will be speaking at Capitalism and Morality this year. Professor Amy Wax will be speaking. And people who don't know about Amy Wax, and I absolutely love what she says. They should watch her conversation, an hour-long discussion with Tucker Carlson. She has a lot of other speeches. She is hated by the woke people because she's a female and she's a professor in a university. She has, I think, been fired from her post and she's fighting against it. A very good fight that she's putting forth. I absolutely love the work she does, and she is one of the keynote speakers in my seminar on the 9th of September in Vancouver this year. Another new speaker we have is Maxime Bernier of People's Party of Canada. And again, I truly like his policies, and I hope Canadians find the courage to go and vote for him, because if they don't vote for Maxime Bernier, Canada's drift towards wokeism will continue and actually gain pace over the period of time. So these are two new speakers. We have the usual speakers, Adrian Day, Walter Block, Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute, and Rick Rule at the seminar.
Oh, that's an awesome collection of speakers there. Well, Mr. Bhandari, it's been an absolute delight speaking with you, sir. Wishing you the absolute best, sir.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Maurice.
Pleasure is all mine, sir. Thank you.
The information presented on Proven and Probable is provided for educational and informational purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice, or any other advice. You should not make any financial, investment, or trading decision based on any of the information presented without first undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or competent financial advisor.